Intention is a question of facts.
I thought they did a pretty good job, but then I'm just a reporter.
Under 302, I think the police has done their job, I guess.
Yeah, judges are human beings.
Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the week's top news. My name is Azmi Hassan, returning as host to help facilitate this latest round of Information Digest. Now, today, we will be talking about Malaysia's legal framework, particularly concerning Section 302 of the Penal Code. Now, this section carries profound significance as it addresses the punishment for murder, where as such, in Malaysia's criminal law, highlights that whoever commits murder can be punished with death. Now, in this episode, we'll be diving into the legal complexities as well as consideration in terms of securing conviction under Section 302. Of course, this is in light of recent news reports surrounding a senior police officer in Ipoh allegedly involved in a hit-and-run accident, killing a 17-year-old teenager. Now, we will not be talking about the case in particular. As you know, court proceedings are underway. But with the decision made by the Attorney General's Chamber, AGC, committing the senior police officer and charging him with murder has triggered a lot of conversation. And this is why we are here today. Separately, we will also be talking about the Look East policy, in which Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim recently announced that China will be included. Now, for those of you back at home who wants to know, in 1982, this was when the Look East policy was established, 6 months after Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad came into office as our fourth Prime Minister. Now, what opportunities does this present with China being part of this policy? We're going to talk about that as we go into our discussion, but before that, I want to introduce members of today's panel. To my right, I have Leslie Andres. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you, Amalina. It's good to be here.
I'm glad that you're here. Now, Leslie
I
Andres.
don't know why, but okay.
Now, Leslie Andres is our news editor for online, but of course, the reason why you're here is because you have extensive experience in crime reporting, having to cover many high-profile cases. One of it is Kenny Ong.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very glad that you're here. Next, of course, to talk about Section 302 in particular is our senior criminal lawyer, Salim Bashir. Thank you for coming, Salim.
Thank you, Amalina, for the invite.
Yes. Salim was also formerly the president for Malaysian Bar between 2020 and 2021. So definitely we're going to have a very insightful discussion later on. Right, next, we have Dr. Azmi Hassan, who's from Nusantara Academy for Strategy Research Senior Fellow. Welcome, Dr. Azmi.
Thank you. I'm with Leslie. What am I doing here? Talking about Section 302? Okay, let's talk about Section 302, I guess.
I mean, I suppose the two topics is on. It's not just trending, but we actually want to know, the considerations behind these two topics as well. And this is why we have our experts here today. Right. To start off, let's start with, the Section 302 in particular. First, to understand now that the mandatory death penalty has been lifted, and how does that, affect convictions under Section 302 and Section 304? Maybe, Salim, you want to explain this first?
Yeah, thanks, Amalina. First of all, the netizens need to know that as far as the law is concerned, death penalty is very much alive. It's not been abolished. What is being amended, what is the law that has been promulgated by the government is to abolish mandatory death penalty. In other words, vice versa, it gives the discretion to the court to decide based on the facts of each particular case whether to impose death penalty or to impose imprisonment of between the range of 30 to 40 years and 12 stroke minimum. This is the options that made available by virtue of a new act.
But of course, we want to understand what's the difference between Section 302 as well as 304. Maybe, Salim, you can also help explain that as well.
In respect of Section 302, when we say loosely what 302 means is a murder charge. Okay, and it's a very serious charge. And in America, it's called it first degree murder. But technically, that's what it is.
Right.
It is a murder under Section 302. And the ingredients that need to be proven as far as the murder is concerned is you must have an intention to commit a murder, intention to cause death. And secondly, you must have an intention to cause physical injury, grievous physical injury that resulted one to die. Third, you must, by virtue of your act, you must have the necessary knowledge that due to your act, the person will die,
Right.
resulting to loss of life. So this is the primarily elements that need to be proven before a person is charged for 302 murder.
Yeah, but Salim, I guess it's
Yes.
going to be very difficult.
First and foremost, in order for a murder charge to be proven, apart from the three elements which I have spoken about and correctly pointed out, the threshold level is very high. You see, the prosecution need to prove a very cogent evidence to bring a charge under murder, to convict a person under murder. So therefore, in failure of them to satisfy any of these ingredients, there is a strong likelihood the charge might be reduced by the court, or the prosecution themselves can initiate the charge to be reduced to section 304, that is culpable homicide not amounting to murder, which results to an imprisonment instead of taking away the person's life. Okay, and the threshold of proof to prove a case under section 305 is much lower compared to proving a charge under the murder. And as far as the ingredients are concerned, you just have to prove there is a likelihoodness of the death happening. That is sufficient to fasten a charge for 304, that is voluntary manslaughter.
Right.
Okay? And to prove a case for murder, you have to be, the court have to be certain that this person possesses sufficient intention and his act alone have caused the death.
Right.
Okay? Motive, if I could add, Ms. Amalina, the motive is irrelevant as far as a murder charge is concerned. For example, if I could allow to be give an example, let's say I have intention of a motive to cause fear to someone, to miss. Let's say I walk past Miss A's house and I feel that I wanted to cause fear on her, and I went to that house. I poured kerosene on her post box and I flamed it, and thinking that she will be frightened, and I leave. After that, what happened? Her entire house got burned, and she or her loved one have died due to that. Though my motive is just to cause fear, but that is irrelevant because I would have foreseen that due to my act, it will cause grievous injury to someone, and that is sufficient to constitute murder.
And this, I suppose, conditions is also part of the section 300 of the Penal Code, right? In
Obviously.
addressing murder.
Obviously.
Still going back into, challenges in proving intent, we know that intent is a subjective state of mind, right? Apart from the key measures that you just established in differentiating between motive and intent, what challenges are typically faced during court proceedings in securing that intention under section 302?
Very good question. Intention is a question of facts. Okay, even devils also cannot establish an intention of a human being. You see? So we do. It can only be established by way of analyzing the evidence presented by the prosecutions.
Right.
That could be, that varies actually. That could be from the fact whether the act will result into a death, and how you want to do that is by looking at the forensic evidence, for example.
Right.
The kind of how grievous the injury was caused, the vital, which part of the body the injury was caused, the force that was used, any other circumstantial evidence which points to the fact that you wanting to kill that person.
Right.
Okay, so these are the kind of elements that the court will take into consideration based on the presented facts to come to a conclusion whether it is a murder or is it culpable homicide not amounting to murder. You see, for example, if I could point out, the amount of attack, the kind of fatal blow, and which part of the body, for example, if it is one stabbing wound to aorta, which definitely resulting to a death, it could be different than a blow or a stabbing wound to another part of the body which may not be vital enough to cause death. But because of underlying disease, it has resulted in bleeding, heavy bleedings, and he died. So that could be a difference. Okay, that could actually go to the root of your intention. If I'm coming to you and with a knife and stabbing on the aorta, I must have a real intention of killing you off, causing your death. But if I'm just coming there and I just stabbed, maybe because of a sudden fight or because of some heat at the heat of the moment, I stabbed you on a place which is may not be vital, but you died. Then the court will consider, well, this person may not have the intention, because he didn't actually attack you on the vital part of the body which resulted in death. But because of underlying situation of your condition, your physical condition, you died. And then it may not fasten murder.
Yeah, but on that note, Salim, I'm not sure, is there any precedent that the vehicle is the weapon that's been charged under Section 302? I've never heard about that. I'm not sure.
Okay, I'm not going to touch much on the exact case because as correctly pointed out, the trial is underway. So, but we have to look at the situation, the facts, whether, and we have to differentiate whether it is actually an accident or it's actually meant to cause grievous injury to someone, resulting to death. These are the two elements that the court need to visualize.
Right. I have one question following up to that, right? So in cases involving driving offences, how complicated is actually to prove intent of murder?
You see, in a case of accident, for example, or driving rashly or negligently, it will fall under the Road Traffic Act, or the most under Section 304 capital A, that is causing death by rash or negligence, which carries a much lower punishments compared to charging a person under murder. And the standard of proof, or the burden of proof, of course, lies with the prosecution. The standard of proof in road traffic matters are much lower compared to charging a person under the murder, for murder. In a case involving accident, there is no intention to cause death. Okay, as opposed to a case where a person is charged for murder, where he deliberately drive a car onto someone, roll it over someone, that definitely premeditates the fact that the person could have an idea to cause grievous injury. May not be murder, but cause grievous injury. So the least the court need to now look at it objectively to decide whether it actually falls between 302 or 304. And absolutely it's not an accident case if with that kind of facts.
Right.
Yeah, so I guess the most important thing here is intent. I mean, if I were to suddenly see someone at the side of the road and I feel like knocking this guy down, and I do, right? And that would be intent, I guess, right? Whereas, for instance, if I'm driving along and someone crosses the road in front of me and I bang into the guy, that would not be intent then. So that would fall under the Road Transport Act probably, or at the most 304.
Yes. If Mr. Leslie were to drive on your car in a high-speed chase and you ram over someone, that may not be murder. That may not be murder. That could be a rash of negligence. Okay? It may not even be fastened under 304 because your intention is to escape from the police chase.
Right.
And in the course of that, you have rammed someone. So it's a pure accident. As opposed to a situation, you are driving the car to a crowded place and you ram deliberately. You ram without any excuse. You ram over a group of people in that particular area. Then yes.
Just to be clear, what is the punishment for 304?
304 carries a 3 years imprisonment, obviously.
3 years.
Yes, 30 years.
Oh, 30 years.
30
Oh,
years.
sorry.
Whereas 304 capital A for causing rash or negligence is 2 years.
Oh,
2 years.
well, that's a big
In
difference.
fact, much lower than the road transport, which
Yeah.
amended section 41A.
Sorry, what's 41A? What's the
41A
punishment?
is causing death by reckless driving.
And the punishment for that is
Oh, now it's 6 years.
6 years.
It was last time, it's mandatory 2 years. But after that Lajak case, the one
Right.
happened in Johor Bahru,
Right.
the parliament have legislated to increase the sentencing.
Leslie, I also want to ask you this. During your time as a reporter, when you were covering all these cases, when you look at the forensic team, how extensive is the work that went into it?
Well, I can tell you that I have actually a lot of respect for our forensic team. Even back then, when, all those years ago when I was covering crime, they were pretty thorough, very thorough, in fact. Mostly murder cases I covered, so not too many cases where it's a vehicular death or anything like that. But yeah, they were very professional. We had a good relationship with them. I covered mostly Selangor and KL, so we had a good relationship with both the head of the Selangor Forensic Department and the KL Forensic Department. I thought they did a pretty good job, but then I'm just a reporter.
Right. Okay, in the event that there is no forensic evidence, how complicated it is to actually secure a conviction under 302 or even 304?
Okay, in a case of an accident, forensic evidence will actually point out the signs of crime. Will actually points out the speed, the distance between the victim and the car. You could actually gather that sort of evidence from tire marks, skid marks. Okay, if the brake is not functioning, okay, that could be a probable defense. So all this will come into picture when the experts analyze the vehicles or the crime scenes, okay, to find out all these tidbits of the evidence which I have mentioned earlier, in order to secure convictions or in exonerating the culpability of the driver, for example, in accident cases. Equally, in a murder case, for example, the case that I did, Aminul Rashid, the shooting of a boy in Shah Alam, yes, there was a ballistic test conducted on the pistols which was used to that was confiscated, that was believed to have shot the boy, and the crime scenes, how many bullets were actually fired, the range of firings, and all these things are evidence which will be presented in courts by the prosecution to strengthen their case. And all these evidence are mere corroborations, just to corroborate the eyewitnesses, the ocular evidence, they call it, the eyewitnesses and so on. But the eyewitness evidence are much more probable compared to scientific evidence.
Okay, before we go into...
Sorry, just
Yes,
to
again.
add on to what both our distinguished panelists said, Dr. Azmi, dashcam footage is something that is actually a very recent, thing. So, I mean, before we had dashcams, this is what the forensics teams, the police forensics teams were doing. They were looking at skid marks. They were looking at injuries to the victims, all that sort of thing. So I guess dashcam footage now will be an added advantage. But if you don't have that, you fall back to the old school way of doing things.
Okay, we're talking about dashcam footages, but also footages from the public. Will that also constitute as forensic evidence as well if it's guided by the police?
Of course, so long they satisfy the requirement evidential burdens, they can actually introduce that sort of evidence, including dash cams and all that. It could be subject to challenge, no doubt about that, because it may reflect the actual footings, or the defense could mount a challenge saying that it was doctored. You see, so everything is possible nowadays in in technologies world.
That is so true.
That could be a possible attack that we made on this kind of evidence.
Yeah, but again, Abalina talking about, from mobile camera, for example, I think 3 years ago in United States, Mississippi, the kneeling kneeling case
Oh, yes.
by 3 police officers. I think why the first officer was charged with murder because of the visual
Yeah.
taken by the public. I think
Right.
that's it plays your mind.
Strengthens,
It
yeah.
strengthen your evidence
Yeah.
again.
With that, challenges that may arise during, presenting or at least interpreting all this evidence in court. So what kind of challenges would a prosecution team usually face?
Prosecutions? Well, prosecutions, I think, I'm not talking about behalf of the prosecutors, but most of the prosecutors will find a challenge of bringing the charge and proving it. And how they do that, they have to face the barrage of cross-examination by the defense counsel against their witnesses, against the prosecution witnesses. The prosecution have to prove the authenticity of the evidence. Okay, the chain of evidence should not be broken. If the chain of evidence of the presented in court are being broken, that could be also something that the court may not admit as part of evidence, and it might lead to one being acquitted on that ground. You see? So that can happen. That can happen. We, as far as possible, the court do not want to convict somebody on unsure evidence. They do not want to tolerate miscarriage of justice.
Right.
Okay, so they have to be pretty sure of the ingredients that are being proven for murder, and the evidence presented supports the propositions of a murder.
Right. Right. I want to understand further about the Criminal Procedure Code, because just you mentioned about this cross-examination process prior to being in court that a team has to go through. Does the prosecution team actually have its own check and balance team, like its own investigators, its own defense team to just cross-examine their own evidence that they will be presenting in court, just to secure the case?
Most of the prosecutors in Malaysia, the DPPs, who act as alter ego of the public prosecutors in courts, they actually rely on the investigation by the police, all other enforcement authority, SPRM and so on. Okay, they don't personally conduct investigation. They direct on investigation, yes. If they find there's a shortfall, the shortcomings in the investigation, they direct the investigators to go and look for it, to go and investigate further before they could establish at least a prima facie charge of a murder before the person is brought to court. But they don't directly involve in the investigations.
Oh, okay. Would that impede the trial period, or at least a criminal case period, to come to a conclusion? Because then you have to go back to this body of authority to hey, we don't have much evidence, then we have to offset it to you, and then now you have to go down on the ground, collect it yourself.
Normally what the prosecution will do, they will try to get all this evidence ready before they can even charge the person in court. If they're not satisfied that the investigations have gone on the line that, in line of the law, they will actually direct the prosecutions to go further and study this case and ensure that you get sufficient evidence before we even charge this person for murder.
I think we see that a lot. We have reports of maybe the Selangor police chief or district police chief saying, "Oh, the IP or investigation paper has been sent back to us for further action."
Yes.
Right.
That happens. That happens. In the midway of the trial, also, if the prosecution feels that there is insufficient evidence, they have all the power constitutionally and under the federal constitutions, Article 145 of the federal constitutions, and also under the Criminal Procedure Code, to withdraw the charge.
Oh,
Or even to offer a reduction
okay.
to culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Easy? So long it fits the evidence.
Yeah.
So long there's a conviction.
But
Exactly.
Salim, how fast the charge has been under 302? I think the police has done their job, I guess.
Yeah.
And the AGC or DPP, I
Yes.
think, satisfied with it,
Yes.
I guess. So
Yes.
most probably there are evidence, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, talking about evidence, we also want to talk about witnesses and corroboration, right? The corroboration of evidence when you present it in court. But of course, when we talk about witness and the witness testimonies, a lot of it has to be filtered out. I just want to understand from at least legal processes, how tough is it to filter out testimonies that are just noise and testimonies that are actually very accurate to the event or to the crime that has taken place?
Okay. Generally, the court evidence, via oral evidence or documentary evidence, is admissible, so long it satisfies the evidential burden, evidential rule, it will be admissible. At times, what happens, the evidence are being challenged by the defense. When the evidence are being challenged by the defense by virtue of law, that particular evidence are taken away because that piece of evidence could be prejudicial. The prejudicial effect of that evidence could outweigh the probative value of that particular evidence. And if it's prejudicial against the accused, and he feels that that accused is not going to get a fair trial by introducing that piece of evidence, and it was challenged, and the court feels that it need to be thrown out, should not be made admissible, it would not be considered.
Right. But in the situation of actually securing the conviction under Section 302, right? Because it's the highest form of, I suppose, conviction here for killing, right? How important, or like to what extent should we rely on witness testimonies as opposed to forensic evidence? You know,
the best evidence rule is oral evidence of the witness coming to court and giving their testimony, what they saw, what they heard. You see, but it's subject to challenge. There are situations also that I'm not doubting the fact that they maybe they are under pressure. I don't know, but there could be situations where we can't run away from the fact they could be lying. You see, so that is where the other evidence helps out to point out whether this particular witness giving oral evidence is telling the truth or not. You see, there must be other evidence to corroborate the oral evidence of the witnesses.
Even in the situation where the witness was actually the victim, do you have to also cover with other evidence as well?
Of course, more so in a case of like sexual offences.
Victim that survived lah.
Yeah, it may not be in a murder case, but in a case of a sexual offences.
Right.
You see, where the victim coming and narrating her stories and what the agony that she went through and all that, it's also subject to corroborations. If you take it on the fact that if it is word, take it as a gospel truth, or whatever the evidence presented by the victim is the truth, then there is a need for us to go through the trial. Okay, in a trial process, apart from the victim's evidence, her evidence need to be corroborated by all the other evidence presented by the prosecutions to see whether this particular victim is telling the truth or not.
One last one.
Sure.
For Salim.
yeah.
For Salim.
Yeah.
Judge versus jury trial. Which one you prefer?
we had jury trials before Mona Pendi. After Mona Pendi, it was taken off. Obviously, there is positive, negative aspects of a jury trial. One of the reasons why jury trials were taken off is, apart from the fact that it's very difficult to get a jurors to come in and it's costly, there are also emotional effects because the jurors are laymen. And more so now with the social media standings at current situations, they are exposed. So when they decide on facts, they may be influenced by the narratives that have been spoken outside the courtroom. Okay, and that is where it's worrying actually. Yeah. Okay, so to me, I rather safe for a judge who are trained in law to actually decide on facts.
Right. I mean, talking about that, spill over to that is like, cases that has a lot of media attention, dealing with public scrutiny as well as pressure. For you, as a criminal lawyer, how far can this sort of external pressure impact legal proceedings, especially when securing a conviction under 302? Based on your past cases, has it ever derailed any expected outcome when it comes to present
Salim,
evidence in court?
You can mention the bicycle aja because it's already over. Because the emotional,
yeah, it's true. You see, we have to understand that judges are human beings. Okay, judges also exposed to looking at the social medias and listening to newspapers and talking to their colleagues and so on. To a certain extent, we can't run away from that. Media trials have taken place before the conclusion of the actual trial in the courtroom. You see, so we can't run away from that. But as far as the judges are concerned, they must understand that they are trained in law. Court is not a place where we play a romantic role of an avenger. Okay, the judges must only decide based on evidence presented in court. They
in
should
your-
not be influenced by what is happening outside the courtroom, no matter how heinous the crime is.
Even if like certain crucial information was leaked to the media, and as that is actually the truth. I mean, when it comes to evidence,
Yeah.
how do you deal with that?
If it have to be proven, even if it's leaked to the media, it have to be proven by the prosecution. Okay, the veracity of that particular information must be must be proven in court. You see, when we were dealing with the police shooting, there were so many things that went on. People, the whole thing was politicized, and people are saying, it's shooting spree by police back then. And when the boy, he was killed mercilessly by the police.
You're talking
But
about the
Aminul
teen-
Rashid's case,
Aminul
which
Rashid.
we did. So all these things to a certain extent, of course, it will influence the court, the process of the trial, but it should not be the case. End of the day, as I said, we are not dealing with jury system. The trial sitting, the one judge who is sitting to decide on trial, in the trial on law and facts, must decide objectively, without any bias and without any influence from outside world, apart from this courtroom.
Now you've had a long career as a lawyer. I won't mention how long, but how confident are you in our judiciary to actually be unbiased when we've had all this sort of media scrutiny into cases? How confident are you in our judiciary?
I'm very confident about Malaysian judiciary, that they are who are trained in law. They will decide fairly based on law and evidence. And if any party is aggrieved by the decisions, thinking that is a biased decision, they have at all means remedy to appeal to the superior courts. And superior court will definitely magnify the evidence presented by the prosecutions at the trial courts.
It's good to hear.
Okay.
During our witnesses and corroboration discussion earlier on, I forgot to ask about the examples of corroboration that are typically presented in murder trials. Maybe you can help disclose them for us.
It's essentially depend to the facts of the particular case. DNA is very important.
DNA.
Yeah, people got exonerated because of DNA. If you look at the case of Hanif Basri, for example, how the DNA actually resulted, the question of the DNA have resulted in acquittal of the accused who was on trial. You see? So it's very interesting to know that DNA plays a very important role. Apart from that, other form of evidence like hair strands, the medical reports, on the injury caused, and psychiatric reports, chemist reports in drug cases. All these plays a very important role in analyzing a particular case. So actually, it depends to the type of offences
Right.
that is made available. In murder trials, forensic evidence is very crucial. Very crucial. It determines the cause of death of one.
Salim.
Yeah.
Amalina is a big fan for CSI.
Uh-huh.
No wonder she's asking that. Okay.
One more thing, Samalina, perhaps this is something a concern of the practitioners, is on the delivery of documents during the trials, as opposed to what the happenings in practice in US or United Kingdom. In Malaysia, we don't have the privilege of the entire investigating papers being delivered to the defense. We only be given documents which the prosecution feel they wanted to tender in court. So if there is anything benefits or favorable to the accused, we may not have the privilege of looking at it.
Oh.
Okay.
See? So this is something that even the bar actually wanting
Pushing for.
an amendments by way of a law to enable the defense to have the entire investigation papers, including witness statements of certain witnesses which was not called to the court, to be given to the defense.
Oh, okay.
Right, and we are talking about witnesses that may say something completely different from what the prosecution is trying to put forward. and the prosecution is not obliged to give this to you then.
Yes, if any, obviously prosecution would not bring in any witnesses or tender any form of evidence which is adverse to their case.
Right.
So that particular document it would not be made available for defense to access. So this is quite disturbing. And this is what we always clamor for. We want these sort of documents to be given to us. So let us have a fair trial.
Do you see this happening in anytime in
I
the
don't
near
know,
future?
but we will keep on knocking the door. Hopefully,
Right.
the door opens one day
Okay.
for the law to be amended.
What's the hiccup then? What's the obstacle actually?
Well, it's a privilege of the prosecution. But this is actually reason. Even the little document that we are having is actually reason. About 10, 15 years ago, it was made into a law to enable the prosecution to give us a document. Before that, it was just trial by ambush. We don't have any documents. You were just given a piece of charge. This is the charge that your client charged for, and no documents are given. You see? But after that, they had the Section 51A of the Criminal Procedure Code, which allows the prosecution to give some documents which they wanted to tender in court, but not the entire investigation papers.
Right.
I want to wrap up this particular topic of discussion, right? I suppose, if not Holy Trinity, the key elements in securing a conviction under 302 from Salim. If you can just give us the top essentials for it.
The prosecution must ensure that the person, that there must be a coincide of intentions and the act. Mens rea and actus rea must coincide before a murder charge is fastened. And when talking about intentions to cause death, cause the serious injury that resulting to a death, and knowing the very fact that by virtue of my act, it will result to a death. This is the three core elements that the prosecution must prove in order to get a conviction for murder. In absence of any one of it, it will fall back on Section 304. Culpable homicide not amounting to murder. And I always crave for the prosecution to satisfy all these three elements before even charging one for a murder.
Thank you for that. I mean, it's very detailed, and at least I hope everyone here, as well as our audience back at home, can understand further in terms of the complexities as well as considerations to secure Section 302 of the Penal Code. Now, let's move along to our second topic of discussion, in which concerns the Look East policy, where Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim recently announced that now it will include China. Dr. Azmi, that's why you're here today, right? So this particular announcement was made during his 5-day working visit to Tokyo recently, in which saw the celebration of Japan and ASEAN. And I think during Anwar's visit in the United States, prior to that, especially during APEC, he was asked why Malaysia is tilting towards China. He simply replied, because they're investing more. So looking at global economic integration and having China part of it, is there a need to advocate more joint research, more collaboration in coming up with policies that are specific to this bilateral relation between Malaysia and China?
Yes, Amalina, Salim and Leslie, you are turning 180 degrees right now. Okay, I love talking about the 302, basically. I think, as you mentioned, the Look East policy, when it was introduced in 1982 and 1980s during Mahathir era, at that time, China was in the backwater. It was South Korea, Taiwan, and also Japan. I think that's the basis that we are looking. But Japan took the limelight because technologically, economically, they are way ahead. But South Korea and Taiwan is not far behind. I'm not sure why. When we talk about Look East policy, it was Japan. But again, now China is one of the superpowers in economy. I think we have been working with them for quite some time, a decade ago. So China, it was there, except that when Datuk Seri Anwar announced Look East policy will be including China, it create more turmoil because they are saying, wow, now Malaysia is going towards bias toward China. But no, I think we have been working with China for quite so long.
Right.
So I guess it's just an official announcement, especially on digital economy. I think we are going big, Leslie, on
I
digital
think
economy.
you just exactly said what I had thought.
Okay.
It was just like an official acknowledgement of China. I mean, China's, I think we've had 200 US billion worth of trade
Yep.
between us in
The biggest-
2022.
yeah.
I mean, they're big here. They're in the ECRL. They're Geely has 49% stake in Proton. Yeah. So wow, that was kind of an acknowledgement of what I thought. Thanks. But sorry, carry on.
No, because Salim, when talking about China, politically it's very sensitive issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people always look at like Chinese investors as, this dark cloud in terms of you got to read between the lines.
Yeah.
This is based on commentaries that we see. So my question would be like, are there specific areas in which we are still in the dark in terms of how we can actually foster a better collaboration with China and adopting, all these best practices and knowledge sharing into our own policies?
When talking about digital economy, it's all about technology, whether it's a renewable energy or whether it's a 5G connection. That's what all digital economy is all about. If you look at the Madani economy, I think Datuk Seri Anwar currently digital economy contributed around 22%. Datuk Seri Anwar want another 3 years, 25% or more than that. I think China can help us. And in 2016, President Xi Jinping created in Guangxi area, border to Vietnam, they call it an information harbor company, which to help ASEAN, including Malaysia, if you want to go big on digital economy, renewable energy, or smart technology, this is where Beijing can help. So I guess when I say digital economy, it is everything. High technology, not only ECRL. Yes, you need high technology. Leslie, but I'm quite frustrated with ECRL. I'm from Kota Baru, Pasir Mas. I've been waiting this for so long. Because I cannot, because I'm too old to drive from Kuala Lumpur to Kota Baru. It takes a lot of hours.
Right.
So I guess China, yes, is a very sensitive issue. And coincidentally or not coincidentally, Salim, 3 days ago, BBC created a documentary on Forest City in Johor, the ghost city. And
Right.
yesterday it was...
We have our own report on that as well.
And yesterday it was
Yeah.
Al Jazeera
Right.
about this particular thing. I'm not sure whether it's coincident or what, but trying to show that how bad the Chinese economy is. I think that's all. I guess we can learn a lot. I think we are friends with all, whether United States or China. Even though some say China is our big brother, we have another bigger brother, which is United States. I consider as our bigger brother when talking about the South China issue, maritime
correct.
dispute.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because, of course, with this, inclusion of China in the Look East policy in terms of knowledge sharing and, policy building, the collaboration is also looking into maintaining Malaysia's interests as well. The South China Sea issue is quite a
It's quite sensitive.
sensitive issue.
In fact, 2 years ago, Salim, we nearly go to war with China.
Right.
And our media never played this issue. They call it the West Capella issue, the Petronas ship.
Yep.
Right.
It was shadowed by China Coast Guard.
Coast Guard.
But I think, and at that time, President Trump, he sent 2 warships to protect Malaysia. He said to protect Malaysia from bullied by China. So yes, I think it was a very critical time at that particular time. But Wisma Putra took a neutral stand, which President Trump is not that quite happy.
Right.
Of course, he's not happy. He sent 2 warships, and Malaysia took a neutral stand.
Right.
Not say thank you, President Trump will. We didn't say that. So what I'm saying is that we are taking the neutral step. China being our biggest trade partner. After that, United States,
Right.
the second biggest. So we need both.
Right.
So this is where,
So
we
that
need to be
puts us,
practical about it. Yeah.
Dr. Azmi, if I may, China is always known to develop to actually a world economy, and they have actually launched a Belt and Road initiative.
Yeah.
Do you think that by us getting China into our Look East policy will any way dampen or compromise the sovereignty?
No, I think, as I mentioned before this, Salim, we have been there with China working. BRI, ECRL is part of BRI project and a number of other projects in Kuantan, Gebeng. But I guess why is China is so advanced right now? Their population, their poverty level has gone down drastically. Is because of BRI. So I think, I know there's a negative impact on BRI, especially when talking about Sri Lanka, for example. But we are not Sri Lanka in this case.
Right.
We can pay the debts. And I guess, again, when I said I'm frustrated with ECRL, I'm also frustrated with HSR. I know China is not involved with that, but I'm really waiting for HSR. I'm hoping that decision will be made. And also the 5G, Huawei, because of the negative impact or negative stigma of China, according to the geopolitics.
Do you think this stigma is right? I mean, do you think that it's something that should not be there?
It should not be there. It was used as a political tool. Especially in 2018, before the general election 14, saying that Malaysia is too dependent, China is conquering Malaysia economically, and that's one of the reasons the fall of Barisan Nasional at that particular time. But again, I think if we, as the Malay says, Amalina, Salim, and Leslie, we main dua kolam. Doesn't matter, we main dua kolam. You understand, isn't it? Main dua kolam. Meaning we take advantage of both superpowers. United States and also China in this case. So I think the stigma shouldn't be there.
So we take the best of both worlds.
Yeah, take the best of both worlds. Why not? If China can offer cheaper, better technology than the United States, why not? It's for the benefit of Malaysia, us.
I just wanted to say that exactly that actually. We're at this position whereby we've taken good steps in maintaining the interest between diverse partners, right? So with that a position that Malaysia has, how do you think we can push for a better ASEAN network, a better ASEAN community, but us being the drivers?
Sure. I think ASEAN is basically divided into two when talking about China and United States. And that's the reason during the last APEC meeting in San Francisco, President Biden and Bapak Jokowi meet eye to eye because United States want to pursue Indonesia, not to be too close towards China. And 2 weeks ago, President Xi Jinping visited Vietnam because right now Vietnam is very critical in ASEAN, and Vietnam also is trying, President Xi Jinping is trying to persuade Vietnam to be less close to us. But the problem is that when talking about the South Chinese Sea issue, United States want to ASEAN members to pick
Aside.
I think that's the big problem there. China, being a East nation, they are more very subtle. They don't pulas the tangan, backhand, but United States, they do that directly, but not China. But I think ASEAN is trying to be neutral in this case. Malaysia is very, very neutral in this case. Vietnam, we know where they stand. The Philippines, we know where they stand. But Malaysia is very blur. It's very blur. I think that's good for us, meaning that we are not biased to either United States or China.
Okay, sorry, before I proceed, Les, did you have anything?
No, he actually basically answered all the questions I've had so far.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I have a question on the matter of streamlining approval processes for foreign investment, not just for Chinese investors but all across the board lah. Do you think that we warrant a dedicated task force? Is our current body of authority, or at least ministry, not? I don't want to say not performing enough or whatever, but
no, it's true. We should have one single stop agency in approving foreign FDI, especially because compared to Vietnam and also Indonesia, we are lagging behind. For example, if Indonesia took only 30 days from A to Z, from start to finish, maybe we take another 60 days, for example. I think that's where we are lacking to it. So I guess, yes, well, I mean, now you being very diplomatic there. But again, yes, compared to Vietnam and Indonesia, we are lagging behind in terms of approval. How easy is to apply to do business in this case. Yeah.
So in this point, at this point in time, you think there's too much red tape?
Yeah, too much red tape because it involves 2-3 agency.
Right.
I think what MIDA is doing is correct. But again, MIDA also need to liaise with other agencies, for example. So there's a big issue there. Let me give example about the visa-free policy for the Chinese and also Indian. It takes after much persuasion. I think our minister for Datuk Tiong, the tourism minister, used the example of Thailand that can attract easily the Indian and the Chinese tourists to their country. So I guess it needs some persuasion. Sometimes you need to go, you need to do something that are not that diplomatic to persuade certain agencies to expand their process.
So my next question would be like, how can certain agencies or you just mentioned MIDA, like level up, in terms of meeting the expectations?
Yeah, depend on the minister, I guess. I think the current minister is YB Tengku Zafrul. So hopefully, I think this can be done because we are losing. We are losing to Vietnam, as I mentioned before. We are losing to Indonesia in terms of this process. And also we are in a very bad position because Vietnam can offer more in terms of human resources, and Indonesia, not only they can offer more, but cheaper alternative.
Right.
So there is a competition within these 3 ASEAN nations, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia, to attract FDI, not only from China, but also from the United States.
Right. And fun fact, because like these 2 nations apart from Malaysia are actually experiencing a tech boom.
Yep.
They are exporting a lot of engineers, in which a lot of the Western investors are really looking into tapping into the talent pool.
What I wanted to ask is, what do you think we can offer that Indonesia and Vietnam maybe lack?
Well, maybe the human resources, the experts, compared to Indonesia or Vietnam, the communication, I think we can better communicate, especially in English. I think our workforce, I think, are well educated. So I think that's the difference between Indonesia, Vietnam, and Malaysia. I think we can offer no more cheap labor, I guess. I think we are way past behind the cheap labor. And also our infrastructure, communication infrastructure, I think is better compared to Indonesia or Vietnam in this case. So I think that's the advantage that we have right now, but not so huge advantage in this case.
But enough to get us in competition with Indonesia.
Yes,
and Vietnam.
enough. I think the good thing is that the political stability is there.
Right.
And another good thing is that we are not biased either to United States or China.
Right.
Because the biggest FDI is from United States.
Right.
The
So
investment.
our neutrality then is key.
Yes, it plays a critical role, our neutrality. But again, set aside about the Gaza issue, I think our neutrality, I think that's a huge advantage to us.
Okay, I also want to draw our attention to, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim also mentioned that he has expressed openness to revisit certain policies that has been stagnant for the past 40 years. However, I want to get some sort of further clarity in terms of what kind of policies is he talking about? Maybe Dr. Azmi, do you know?
Yeah, I have no idea what kind
at
of...
least 1 or 2 policies.
Can you mention?
For me,
Yeah,
on my
from you.
side,
Can you mention on your side?
I think looking at the cultural development policies, how
Okay.
how we can actually look into boosting our talent in that area.
Yeah, no, I think talking about CDP, I guess, is very important, I guess. But again, I think China being an, East country, ASEAN country, it is better. I think it's easier for us to be in line from people to people contact because we have basically the same culture compared to United States, which is a Western nation. It is quite difficult, even though from people to people connection, I guess. I think a lot that we do not understand United States, but we can easily understand the Chinese culture there. So I guess, yes, I think about the culture, the culture communication, I think it is very critical. The most important thing is from people to people, connection. I think it is very critical.
From the economic perspective, is there anything that you're actually looking forward to in terms of getting some sort of revival?
Yes, especially tourism. I think China can provide millions of tourists. They are already open up after the pandemic. But again, during this particular year, the numbers are not that we expect the Chinese tourists to come to Malaysia. But it happened also to Thailand. Even though there have been a visa free for Chinese tourists, but the number of tourists coming from China towards Thailand is not what they expect. And similarly for Malaysia, I guess. But again, I think, look at the Arab tourists. They are very comfortable in Malaysia, but I think the promotion is not there. I think the Arab tourists, they have the money power, the staying power, but still they are not coming in drove. They are here, especially during the summer times in the Arab world, but the number is still not there. Similar with the Chinese tourism, I guess we need to do more.
If I could add on.
Yeah, sure.
One of the aspects that Malaysia could look at is establishing a manufacturing hub and production hub in Malaysia. And in order to do that, they must attract the foreign investors. For example, with China, if coming in, they have to set up a productions hub here in Malaysia, and also manufacturing the productions here. And in order to do that, we have to actually be more relaxed on the tax, on the foreign tax, more leverage to be given to the foreign investors. Therefore, they could actually employ our people here, and that actually open up to our, more employment opportunities for Malaysian citizens. Okay, as opposed them going to Thailand or to other countries and opening up, because they know the salary scale, the human resource in Indonesia or in Thailand much more cheaper compared to hiring a worker in Malaysia. You see, so that is something that aspects the Malaysian need to study. In which way they could actually exempt tax for the workers here, so at least they could benefit more with a lesser pay, and also by giving tax value, foreign tax value for the investors. So we have to do that, because if you look at it, Amalina, Dr. Azmi and all that, it is like big brands like tires, for example, Michelin's, what do you call that, Dunlops. They could manufacture in Thailand. And some of the big names which we think that coming from America, the products are coming from America, they're actually manufactured in Thailand or Indonesia. Right. You see? So this is the thing. We want our nation to be the hub for manufacturing and hub for production. And this be good for our citizens.
That has always been the case for us, at least when it comes to Malaysia and Japan relations, because they have set up a lot of the industries here as well.
The Kuantan Industrial Park is part of the China collaboration. But again, Salim, I think again we're talking about the high technology digital economy. For example, Malaysia want to be the hub for the data center. I think we can collaborate with China in this case, so that we can set up the necessary logistic infrastructure. I think the manufacturing, I think, has been there, because the problem with manufacturing, we have to compete with Indonesia and Vietnam. I think that's where we lost in terms of manufacturing. So I guess we are going into the high technology part of the economy here.
My last question would be, how can Malaysia boost its investment or in human capitals internally, right? And how, while doing so, also looking at balancing sustainable development.
Yeah, talking about sustainable, I think Datuk Sri Anwar made a promise that by 2050 it will be a zero carbon emission. We are going that talking about sustainability, but talking about human resources is all about upskilling. No more reskilling, no more to be good in what you study. If you take law, you can do something else. That's upskilling, I guess. I think for me, I'm an engineer, but I talk about other things that I'm more interested to. So you need some sort of upskilling. So I guess training, but training more towards upskilling so that our personnel can change their expertise. I think that's the most important thing, because what you study at the university is going to be different in the real world.
Yeah.
So you need to be ready. You need to be ready to change. So I think that's where the training of upskilling is very, very critical.
Fantastic. It's still something very new to me, and all this. I know that China has been involved with us in a long time. You mentioned Gebeng. Gebeng is something that I had forgotten about actually when I mentioned Gili and the ECRL. Do you see China getting more and more involved in investments in Malaysia?
Yes, compared to United States, I see China will be coming to Malaysia more and more, because I think Beijing felt that Malaysia, Putrajaya, can be neutral in this particular issue. And most of the geopolitics issue, global geopolitics, Salim, I think we are basically in line or parallel with China.
Right.
I have to mention about the Ukraine war
Yeah.
or the Gaza war.
Yes.
We are more parallel
That's right.
with Beijing compared to Washington. So in that case alone, I think geopolitics plays a very critical role here.
Obviously.
I think Beijing will be more than happy to invest, to put more money in Malaysia. It's a win-win situation.
Looking into this Look East policy, what's certain is that it's a nation-building exercise, not just focusing on Malaysia, but also the partnering nations within the region, plus China. What's interesting to see is what would transpire at least in the next year, now that the Madani government is also going into its second year of administration, right? And until then, we will definitely be dissecting more and more news updates today. So that is all the time that we have, unfortunately, for today's show. Earlier on, we were speaking about securing a conviction under Section 302 of the Penal Code. We have our expert guest here, Salim Bashir. And I want to thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
Please don't be a stranger if we were to also extend another invite for future episodes. And of course, our Look East policy expert, Dr. Azmi Hassan. Thank you again for joining.
Thank you.
And Leslie Andres, our news editor and revered crime journal.
Really? I just want to say that this was interesting because it's two different topics altogether.
Right.
And I know Dr. Azmi at the start of this said that he was wondering, what am I doing here? Talking about 302, But I have to say, Dr. Azmi, you had some
really good
fantastic questions.
Yes.
Right.
And vice versa.
He got climatized.
You climatized very
and vice
well.
versa for Salim. I mean, we had a good discussion going here. Really enjoyed this.
Yes. I think that's what at least Beyond the Headlines is trying to bring, topic of interest that's on everybody's mind. So if you like this particular episode, don't forget to like and subscribe, suggest more topic of interest. Don't forget to also tune in next week. My name is Amalina Kamal. Thank you.